Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Sophia Bennett had always been the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room, with her captivating smile, warm eyes that sparkled with intelligence, and a figure that drew appreciative glances. She had never lacked attention from men, but none had affected her the way Ethan Caldwell did from the moment they met at her cousin's wedding reception. "Would you care to dance?" The deep, confident voice had come from behind her as she sipped champagne watching couples twirl across the dance floor. When Sophia turned, she found herself looking into the most mesmerizing blue eyes she'd ever seen. Ethan stood before her, tall and impossibly handsome, with a smile that made her heart skip several beats. "I'd love to," she'd answered, placing her hand in his extended one, feeling an immediate jolt of electricity at his touch. That first dance had led to many more that night, and by the time the reception ended, Sophia knew she'd met someone special. Ethan had asked for her number, called her the very next day, and swept her into a whirlwind romance that left her breathless and completely in love. Their first date had been at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Ethan had ordered wine without looking at the menu, impressing Sophia with his knowledge as he discussed the subtle notes and flavors with the sommelier. By candlelight, he told her about his dreams of starting his own business, his eyes lit with passion and determination. "You're different from other women I've met," he told her, reaching across the table to take her hand, his thumb caressing her knuckles. "There's something special about you, Sophia Bennett, something that makes me want to be a better man." Words like these, spoken with such apparent sincerity, had melted any reservations she might have had. When he kissed her goodnight outside her apartment door, Sophia knew she was already falling for him. The following weeks had been a blur of romantic gestures, surprise picnics in the park, midnight drives, to watch the stars from a hillside, passionate kisses that left her dizzy with desire. Ethan knew exactly how to make her feel cherished, sending flowers to her workplace for no reason, other than because you deserve beauty in your day, as his notes would say. It was during their third month of dating that Sophia first brought Ethan home to meet her family. The lunch had not gone as she'd hoped. "He's charming, I'll give him," that her mother had said afterward, cornering Sophia in the kitchen while Ethan chatted with her sister in the living room. "But there's something about him that doesn't sit right with me." "You're just being overprotective," Sophia had replied, arranging cookies on a plate, unwilling to hear any criticism of the man who had so thoroughly captured her heart. Her mother had sighed deeply, placing a gentle hand on Sophia's arm. "I've heard things, sweetheart. My friend Helen's daughter dated him briefly last year. He was seeing 2 other women at the same time." Sophia had pulled away, anger flashing in her eyes. "That's just gossip. You don't even know if it's true. Why would they make something like that up? Please just be careful. He's extremely good looking. And men like that, men like what Mom, successful, attentive, actually interested in me." Sophia had snapped, her voice rising. "Men who know exactly what to say to get what they want," her mother had finished quietly. That had been just the beginning. As her relationship with Ethan deepened, so did her family's concerns. Her older sister Emily had pulled her aside at a family barbecue to share similar warnings. "I've heard he has a reputation, Sophia. My friend Lauren works at that marketing firm where he used to be employed. She says he was asked to leave because he was involved with a client's wife." "That's ridiculous," Sophia had defended him fiercely. "He left that job to pursue better opportunities. He told me all about it." Emily had given her a look filled with concern. "Are you sure you're not just seeing what you want to see? He's gorgeous, sure, but looks aren't everything." Even her youngest sister Chloe, usually so supportive and carefree, had expressed doubts. "There's something about the way he looks at other women when you're not watching, Sophie. It makes me uncomfortable." But Sophia had dismissed them all. How could they possibly understand what she and Ethan shared? The way he held her at night, whispering promises against her skin, the way he seemed to understand her better than anyone ever had, anticipating her needs and desires. The passion they shared was unlike anything Sophia had ever experienced. Surely that had to mean something profound. When Ethan proposed after just 6 months, Sophia had said yes without hesitation, despite the collective intake of breath from her family. The ring had been stunning, a large diamond that caught the light and drew admiring glances. Later, she would learn he had put it on a credit card he could not afford to pay off. But in that moment, kneeling before her in the restaurant where they'd had their first date, he had seemed perfect. "You're the only woman I want to wake up beside for the rest of my life," he'd vowed, sliding the ring onto her finger. "We're going to build something beautiful together, Sophia." The arguments with her family had intensified after the engagement. Her mother had pleaded with her to at least consider a longer engagement, to really get to know Ethan before committing her life to him. "Love isn't enough, sweetheart," she'd said, tears in her eyes. "Marriage is hard work, and you need a partner you can trust completely. I do trust him, Sophia had insisted. You just need to give him a chance. You'll see what I see in him eventually. But the tension had only escalated as the wedding approached. During the rehearsal dinner, Sophia had overheard her sisters talking in hushed voices about how Ethan had been flirting with one of the bridesmaids. You're just jealous. Sophia had accused them when confronted. You can't stand to see me happy because neither of you has found what I have. The hurt in their eyes had haunted her, but not enough to shake her conviction. Ethan was her soulmate, her future. Nothing anyone said could change that. On her wedding day, Sophia had been radiant in her white gown, walking down the aisle toward the man of her dreams. Ethan had looked so handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes filled with tears as he watched her approach. In that moment, she had felt vindicated. Surely a man who looked at her with such adoration could not be the person her family feared he was. The ceremony had been beautiful, the reception filled with dancing and laughter, though Sophia couldn't help noticing the forced smiles on her family's faces. Even during the father-daughter dance, her dad had seemed distant, his eyes sad as he held her. It's not too late to change your mind, Pumpkin, he'd whispered, his voice so low only she could hear it. We'll support you no matter what. Daddy, please, she'd begged, just be happy for me. I love him. Her father had nodded, kissing her forehead. I hope he deserves that love. As they had driven away from the reception, tin cans rattling behind their car and "just married" written on the back window, Sophia had looked over at her new husband, filled with hope and excitement for their future together. We proved them all wrong, she'd said, squeezing his hand. They'll see how happy we're going to be. Ethan had smiled, that heart-stopping smile of his, bringing her hand to his lips. It's you and me against the world now, baby, just the way I like it. If only Sophia had recognized the warning in those words, the subtle implication that he preferred her separated from her support system. But love had blinded her, the passionate kind that burned so bright it obscured all the red flags waving frantically in the background. As they had crossed the threshold of their honeymoon suite that night, Ethan sweeping her into his arms with practiced ease, Sophia had been certain she had made the right choice. The night had been filled with passion, his hands and lips exploring her body with a hunger that made her feel desired beyond measure. I'm going to make you so happy, he'd promised as they lay tangled in the sheets afterward. You'll never regret choosing me. Sophia had fallen asleep in his arms, content and hopeful, unaware that those words would come to haunt her in the months ahead. She had chosen love against all odds, against all warnings. Only time would reveal the true cost of that choice. Chapter 2. Early Marriage. Bliss fades. The first 3 months of Sophia and Ethan's marriage had been everything she dreamed of, and more. Their tiny apartment, though modest compared to the homes of their friends, had become a haven of love and passion. Every night Ethan would pull her into his arms the moment she walked through the door, covering her face with kisses, as though they'd been separated for weeks instead of hours. My beautiful wife, he would murmur against her neck, his hands already working at the buttons of her blouse. I've missed you all day. Their evenings would often end with them, tangled in sheets, breathless and satisfied, whispering plans for their future together. Ethan spoke of the successful business he would build, the lavish home they would own, the exotic places they would visit. We'll have it all, baby, he promised, tracing patterns on her bare skin as they lay in the darkness. Everything you deserve and more. Sophia believed every word. How could she not? The way Ethan looked at her made her feel like the most precious thing in his world. His passion for her seemed boundless, his love evident in every touch and whispered endearment. The first subtle shift came around their 4th month of marriage. Ethan, who had been between jobs when they met, continued to struggle, finding work that matched his talents, as he put it. I'm not going to waste my potential on some entry-level position, he told Sophia one evening as she sorted through bills at their kitchen table. I have bigger plans than that. I understand, Sophia replied, though a small frown creased her brow as she calculated their dwindling savings. But maybe something temporary would help while you're building your contacts, just to ease the financial pressure. Ethan's expression had darkened momentarily before he came behind her, massaging her shoulders. You don't need to worry about money, babe. I've got some prospects lined up. Big things coming soon. His lips trailed down her neck, effectively ending the conversation as he pulled her toward the bedroom. It became a pattern. Whenever Sophia brought up practical concerns, Ethan would distract her with affection or change the subject entirely. And though their passion remained intense, Sophia began noticing how their bank accounts steadily decreased while Ethan's contributions were non-existent. One morning, as Sophia prepared for work, she noticed Ethan taking money from her purse. What are you doing? She asked, trying to keep her tone light. Ethan didn't even look embarrassed. Just need a little cash for a meeting today. Potential investor for my business idea. He pocketed the bills without asking permission. "I'll pay you back double when it comes through." Of course, Sophia had said, ignoring the uneasiness settling in her stomach. "Good luck with your meeting." That evening, she'd waited eagerly to hear about the investor. When Ethan finally came home after midnight, the smell of alcohol and expensive cologne clinging to him, he barely mentioned the meeting. "It went fine," he said dismissively when she asked. "These things take time, Sophia. Rome wasn't built in a day." She'd nodded, helping him to bed, as he stumbled slightly, telling herself that networking often involved drinks. It was all part of the business world, wasn't it? As weeks passed, Ethan's late nights became more frequent. The money he took from her purse, or increasingly directly from her bank account, went unexplained. When Sophia gently pressed for details about his business prospects, his responses grew defensive. "Why don't you trust me?" He would demand, blue eyes flashing with hurt that made Sophia immediately backtrack. "I'm working my ass off to build something for us. I do trust you," she would assure him, pushing down her doubts. "I just want to understand what's happening." But understanding seemed increasingly elusive. Ethan, once so communicative about his dreams and plans, began compartmentalizing his life. He'd disappear for hours without explanation, his phone perpetually on silent when he was away. The first time Mrs. Thompson from next door mentioned seeing Ethan bringing someone to their apartment while Sophia was at work, she had dismissed it immediately. It must have been his business partner. Sophia had explained, smiling tightly. "He's been developing a startup concept." The older woman had given her a look that mingled pity with concern. Honey, business partners don't usually hold hands in the elevator. Sophia had laughed it off, making an excuse to end the conversation quickly. But that night she found herself studying Ethan's face as he slept, searching for the man she'd fallen in love with. He was still breathtakingly handsome, his features perfect even in repose. But something had changed in the way she saw him. A seed of doubt had been planted. When she casually mentioned Mrs. Thompson's comment over breakfast, Ethan's reaction was immediate and intense. "She's a nosy old bat who needs to mind her own business," he snapped, slamming his coffee mug down so hard that dark liquid splashed onto the table. "And I can't believe you'd listen to gossip about your own husband." "I didn't say I believed her," Sophia had protested, taken aback by his vehemence. "I just thought you should know what she's saying." Ethan's anger had dissipated as quickly as it had flared, his expression softening as he came around the table to kneel beside her chair. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to snap at you." His hand had cupped her cheek tenderly. "It just hurts that you'd even repeat something like that. You know I only have eyes for you." And then he'd kissed her with such passion and conviction that Sophia's doubts had melted away. They'd made love right there on the kitchen floor so intensely that she was almost late for work. As she'd rushed out the door, lips still swollen from his kisses, Sophia had felt foolish for allowing her neighbor's insinuations to cloud her trust in Ethan. Yet the pattern continued. More neighbors made comments. Friends exchanged glances when Ethan's name came up. Sophia's sister Emily called more frequently, always managing to ask careful questions about how things were going. "We're fine," Sophia would insist, her voice bright with forced cheer. "Ethan's working on some exciting opportunities." But behind her reassurances, Sophia's confidence was eroding. Ethan now regularly came home well after midnight, sometimes not until dawn. The scent of unfamiliar perfume occasionally lingered on his clothes. When she did their laundry, she sometimes found receipts for expensive dinners on nights he'd claimed to be networking in dive bars. Once a long strand of blonde hair that wasn't hers caught on one of his sweaters. Still, Sophia clung to her belief in their love. The Ethan who came home to her when he did come home could still make her feel like the only woman in the world. His touch still ignited passion that made her forget all her doubts. In the afterglow of their lovemaking, it was easier to believe his explanations, to accept his excuses, to ignore the growing evidence that the man she'd married wasn't who she thought he was. The turning point came 6 months into their marriage. Sophia had received a promotion at work, and her boss had taken the team out for a celebration dinner. She'd called Ethan repeatedly to share her good news, but he hadn't answered. Disappointed, but not surprised, she'd enjoyed the evening with her colleagues before taking a taxi home earlier than usual. The apartment had been dark when she arrived, but Ethan's keys had been on the hook by the door. Assuming he was asleep, Sophia had quietly made her way to the bedroom, eager to slip in beside him and share her news. But the bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. Confused, Sophia had checked the living room and kitchen before noticing a thin line of light beneath the bathroom door. She'd approached quietly, hearing the soft sound of water sloshing and what sounded like muffled laughter. Her hand had hesitated on the doorknob. Something inside her had known what she would find. For a moment she'd considered walking away, preserving the illusion of her marriage for one more night. Instead, she'd taken a deep breath and knocked lightly. "Ethan, are you in there?" The sudden silence from within had been all the confirmation she needed. After several long seconds, Ethan's voice had come through the door, artificially casual. "Yeah, just taking a bath. Be out in a bit." A woman's quiet giggle had followed his words, poorly suppressed. Sophia had stood frozen, her hand still on the doorknob, her promotion forgotten. In that moment, the edifice of lies she'd built around her marriage had begun to crumble. She hadn't opened the door. Instead, she'd walked back to the living room, sat on the couch in the dark, and waited. 20 minutes later, Ethan had emerged alone, wearing only a towel around his waist, his hair damp. He'd startled upon seeing her sitting there. "Hey babe, didn't hear you come in. How was your day?" His tone had been perfectly normal, as though nothing unusual had happened. "Who's in the bathroom?" Ethan Sophia had asked quietly. "What are you talking about? Nobody's there." His face had been a mask of innocence, but his eyes had shifted away from hers. Sophia had stood and walked back to the bathroom, pushing open the door before Ethan could stop her. The room was empty, the window open, steam still fogging the mirror. Whoever had been there was gone. When she turned back to Ethan, he was already preparing his defense. "You're being paranoid again, Sophia. There was no one here. I think all those stories from your family are getting to you." But Sophia had seen the second wine glass pushed behind the soap dish, the unfamiliar earring on the floor by the tub. She'd said nothing. Simply walked past Ethan to their bedroom and closed the door, locking it behind her. That night, as she lay alone in their bed, listening to Ethan's pleading and eventually his angry demands from the other side of the door, Sophia finally admitted to herself what everyone had tried to tell her. The man she loved existed only in her imagination. The real Ethan Caldwell was a stranger, a beautiful shell containing nothing but selfishness and deceit. Yet even as tears soaked her pillow, a small voice inside whispered that perhaps she was overreacting. Perhaps there was an explanation. Perhaps it was just one mistake in a moment of weakness. And when morning came and Ethan greeted her with flowers, apologies, and that breathtaking smile that had first captured her heart, Sophia found herself wanting to believe him one more time. The alternative, admitting that her entire marriage was built on lies, was simply too painful to face. "It will never happen again," he promised, his blue eyes filled with what looked like genuine remorse. "You're the only one I love, Sophia, the only one I want." She nodded, accepting the flowers and his kiss, but something had fundamentally changed. The seed of doubt had grown into something that could no longer be ignored. Sophia returned to work that day with new resolve. She would need to support herself fully now. She could no longer count on Ethan for anything, not financially, and certainly not emotionally. What she didn't realize was that this decision would lead her to someone who would show her what real love and loyalty truly meant. Chapter 3. New Job, New Beginning. Sophia's decision to focus on her career came with an unexpected opportunity. Her company was expanding, creating a new division that would require dedicated staff working directly under the CEO, Daniel Harper. When her manager recommended her for an interview, Sophia had accepted without hesitation, seeing it as a chance to further distance herself from the financial dependence that kept her tethered to her increasingly troubled marriage. The morning of her interview, she'd taken special care with her appearance, selecting a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism. As she applied a final touch of lipstick, Ethan had wandered into the bathroom, watching her with sleepy eyes. "You look nice," he'd commented, leaning against the doorframe. Hot date Sophia had ignored the barb, tucking her lipstick into her purse. "Important interview for the new position I told you about. Right, more hours away from home." Ethan had yawned, seemingly uninterested. Then as she moved to pass him, his hand had shot out to grasp her wrist. "Don't forget to stop by the ATM. I need some cash for today." Sophia had gently but firmly removed his hand. "I can't, Ethan. This is an important opportunity for me, for us. I can't be late." His face had darkened momentarily before he shrugged, feigning indifference. "Whatever. I'm sure you can spare $20 for your husband." With a sigh, Sophia had opened her wallet and handed him the only cash she had, $40 she'd been saving for lunch that week. "This is it until payday. Please make it last." Ethan had pocketed the money without thanks, already turning away. "Good luck with the interview. Not that you need it. Any man would hire you with that face." The casual sexism had stung, but Sophia had pushed it aside, focusing instead on the opportunity ahead. She couldn't afford to let Ethan's behavior distract her. Today, the Harper Enterprises headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. As Sophia rode the elevator to the executive level, she took deep, calming breaths, reminding herself of her qualifications and experience. This wasn't just about escaping her financial situation with Ethan. It was about building a career she could be proud of. The receptionist had directed her to a spacious waiting area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sophia was reviewing her resume one last time when a deep, pleasant voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Bennett, I'm Daniel Harper." Sophia looked up to find herself face to face with a man whose presence immediately commanded attention. Tall and broad-shouldered with intelligent gray eyes and a warm smile, Daniel Harper projected an aura of quiet confidence that was worlds apart from Ethan's flashy charm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Harper," she said, rising to shake his extended hand. His grip was firm and brief, professional, without being impersonal. "Please call me Daniel. I've heard excellent things about your work from your department manager." He gestured toward his office. "Shall we?" The interview had gone remarkably well. Unlike other executives, Sophia had encountered Daniel asked thoughtful questions that went beyond her resume, showing genuine interest in her perspective and ideas. By the time they'd finished discussing her potential role in the new division, Sophia felt energized rather than drained. "I have to say, Miss Bennett, may I call you Sophia? Your insights on our client retention challenges are spot on," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair, studying her with evident approval. "I've interviewed 5 candidates this week, and you're the first to identify that particular issue." Sophia smiled, feeling a flush of pride. "Thank you. I've been tracking the patterns in our client feedback reports. They tell quite a story, if you know how to listen." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's exactly the kind of proactive thinking we need." He stood, extending his hand again. "I don't usually make decisions this quickly, but I don't see the point in dragging out the process when the right candidate is sitting in front of me. The position is yours if you want it." For a moment, Sophia was speechless. The role would mean a significant salary increase, enough that she could potentially save for her own place if things with Ethan didn't improve. More importantly, it represented recognition of her abilities, something that had been sorely missing in her personal life. "I would be honored." She finally managed, shaking his hand with genuine enthusiasm. "Excellent. HR will be in touch about the details, but I'd like you to start next Monday if possible." Daniel's smile was warm but professional. "I think we'll work well together, Sophia." As she left the building, Sophia felt lighter than she had in months. The opportunity represented more than just professional advancement. It was a lifeline, a reminder that she was capable and valued, regardless of what was happening in her marriage. She'd called Ethan, immediately eager to share her good news, but as usual, he hadn't answered. Fighting disappointment, Sophia had treated herself to a small celebration lunch instead. Already making mental notes about projects she wanted to tackle in her new role. When she'd arrived home that evening, the apartment was empty. A hastily scrawled note on the counter informed her that Ethan was networking and wouldn't be back until late. Sophia had sighed, her momentary excitement dimming. Even on a day that was so important to her, Ethan couldn't be bothered to be present. She'd fixed herself a simple dinner and gone to bed early, trying to focus on the positive development in her career, rather than the growing emptiness of her marriage. Monday morning had arrived with a sense of nervous anticipation. Sophia had dressed carefully in a new outfit she'd splurged on over the weekend, an investment in her professional future, she told herself. Ethan, nursing a hangover from yet another late night, had barely glanced up from his coffee as she prepared to leave. "You look expensive," he'd commented, his tone impossible to read. "That's new, isn't it?" "Yes," Sophia had replied, simply choosing not to justify the purchase. "I'll be home around 6. Ethan had nodded absently, already reaching for his phone. "I might have a meeting tonight. Don't wait up." Sophia had hesitated at the door, a part of her still hoping for some word of encouragement or pride in her accomplishment. When none came, she'd squared her shoulders and left, determined not to let his indifference affect her first day. Daniel had greeted her with the same warm professionalism he'd shown during their interview, personally introducing her to the team she'd be working with and guiding her through her initial responsibilities. "My door is always open," he told her, as he showed her to her new office. A real office, not the cubicle she'd occupied before. "I value open communication and fresh ideas. Never hesitate to share your thoughts, even if they challenge conventional wisdom." The contrast between Daniel's respectful, appreciative management style and Ethan's self-centered dismissiveness couldn't have been more stark. Throughout that first week, Sophia found herself thriving under Daniel's guidance, eagerly tackling projects that stretched her abilities and showcased her talents. Daniel was unfailingly professional, never crossing any boundaries or making her feel uncomfortable. Yet Sophia couldn't help noticing small details about him: the way his brow furrowed slightly when he was deep in thought, the rich timbre of his laugh when someone made a clever observation, the considerate way he remembered everyone's coffee preferences during long meetings. It wasn't that she was attracted to him, Sophia told herself firmly. It was simply that working with someone who actually saw her, who valued her contributions and treated her with respect, highlighted everything that was missing from her relationship with Ethan. As weeks passed, Sophia settled into her new role with growing confidence. The division was flourishing under Daniel's leadership, and Sophia took pride in knowing her work contributed significantly to their success. She began staying later at the office, partly due to the demanding nature of their projects, but also because going home had become an exercise in disappointment. Ethan's behavior had deteriorated further. The networking excuses continued, but he'd stopped even trying to make them sound plausible. Money disappeared from their account in large chunks, and when Sophia questioned the expenditures, Ethan would turn defensive and hostile. "What, I need permission to spend our money now?" he'd demand, his handsome face twisted with indignation. "You're not my mother, Sophia." "It's not about permission," she would try to explain, keeping her voice level despite her frustration. "It's about communication. We have bills to pay, then pay them with your fancy new salary," he'd sneer. "Isn't that why you took the job? So you could lord it over me, that you're the one bringing in the money?" These arguments typically ended one of two ways. Either Ethan would storm out, not returning until the early hours of the morning, or he would suddenly shift tactics, becoming charming and seductive, using physical intimacy to derail the conversation. And despite everything, Sophia still found herself responding to the latter approach. The physical connection between them remained powerful, a vestige of what had once seemed like love. In those moments, with Ethan's hands and lips making her forget all the hurt and disappointment, Sophia could almost believe they could find their way back to what they'd had at the beginning. Almost, but not quite. One evening, as Sophia worked late finalizing a presentation for an important client meeting, Daniel had appeared in her doorway, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up after a long day. "You're still here," he'd observed, leaning against the doorframe. "It's nearly 9. Sophia had looked up, surprised to find they were apparently the only ones left in the office. "This presentation needs to be perfect. The Westridge account could be a game changer for the division." Daniel had nodded, studying her with those perceptive gray eyes. "It will be perfect because you're handling it. But not if you burn yourself out." He'd hesitated before adding, "When was the last time you ate something?" Sophia had realized with a start that she hadn't had anything since a hasty sandwich at noon. "I guess I lost track of time. As your boss, I can't in good conscience let you work through dinner." Daniel's smile had been warm but respectful. "There's a decent Thai place that delivers late. Would you allow me to order something? We can review the presentation together while we eat." It had been such a simple, collegial offer that Sophia hadn't hesitated to accept. An hour later, they'd sat in the conference room, containers of pad thai and green curry spread between presentation materials, discussing strategies and client expectations. Daniel had offered several insightful suggestions that strengthened her already solid work, his respect for her expertise evident in the way he built upon her ideas rather than overriding them. When they'd finally wrapped up around 10:30, Daniel had insisted on calling her a car service. "It's too late for public transportation," he'd said firmly. "The company can cover it." As they'd waited in the lobby for the car to arrive, a comfortable silence had fallen between them. Sophia had found herself studying Daniel's profile, noting how different he was from Ethan, not just physically, but in his entire demeanor. Where Ethan was all flash and surface charm, Daniel radiated a quiet, substantial confidence. He didn't need to be the loudest or most attractive man in the room. His presence was compelling in a much more meaningful way. "Thank you," she'd said suddenly, "not just for dinner, but for seeing me. My capabilities, I mean." Daniel had turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "You make it easy. You're exceptionally talented, Sophia. Any company would be fortunate to have you." The simple, genuine compliment had warmed her more than Ethan's most passionate declarations ever had. This wasn't flattery designed to achieve something. It was honest appreciation from someone who valued substance over appearance. The car had arrived, then preventing further conversation. As Sophia settled into the back seat, Daniel had leaned down slightly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a successful day. I can feel it." Driving home, Sophia had found herself smiling, energized, despite the late hour. The presentation would indeed be a success. She was confident in their work and in Daniel's leadership. For the first time in months, she felt genuinely optimistic about something in her life. The apartment was dark when she arrived, no sign of Ethan. A familiar mixture of relief and disappointment washed over her as she moved through the empty rooms preparing for bed. As she washed her face, Sophia studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror, noting the spark in her eyes that had been missing for too long. "You are more than this marriage," she told her reflection quietly. "You are more than his wife." The realization settled over her with surprising weight. Somewhere along the way, Sophia had lost herself in trying to make her relationship with Ethan work. She'd accepted his behavior, made excuses for his failures, diminished her own needs, all for a man who couldn't even be bothered to ask about her day. As she slipped between the sheets, Sophia made a decision. She would give her marriage one more chance. one honest conversation about what needed to change. And if Ethan couldn't or wouldn't meet her halfway, she would have to seriously consider whether this was how she wanted to spend the rest of her life. What Sophia didn't realize as she drifted off to sleep was that soon that decision would be made for her in a way she never could have anticipated. Chapter 4. First Proposal. The office late night. 3 months into her new position, Sophia had established herself as an indispensable part of Daniel's team. Her innovative approaches to client relations had already resulted in 2 major account acquisitions, and her ability to anticipate problems before they arose had saved countless hours of damage control. Daniel had taken notice. Sophia often caught him watching her during meetings, his gray eyes thoughtful as she presented her ideas. Unlike the appraising looks she sometimes received from other men, the kind that made her feel like an object rather than a person. Daniel's gaze held appreciation for her mind, her capabilities, her essence. It was refreshing, and increasingly it was confusing because despite her best efforts to maintain strict professionalism, Sophia couldn't deny the quiet flutter in her chest whenever Daniel stopped by her office, or the way her day brightened when he offered one of his rare, genuine smiles in response to something she said. "This is ridiculous," she chided herself one evening as she caught herself fixing her hair before a meeting in Daniel's office. "You're married even if it is to a lying cheating." She cut herself off with a sigh. No matter how troubled her marriage had become, Sophia wasn't the type of woman to develop feelings for another man. She respected herself and Daniel too much for that. Yet the contrast between the 2 men in her life grew starker with each passing day. While Ethan continued his pattern of late nights, unexplained absences, and financial irresponsibility, Daniel demonstrated consistent integrity, thoughtfulness, and respect. Where Ethan took and took without giving back, Daniel continually looked for ways to recognize others' contributions and lift them up. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. The office had emptied hours earlier, but Sophia remained at her desk finalizing a presentation for an important meeting the following morning. So absorbed was she in her work that she didn't notice Daniel standing in her doorway until he gently cleared his throat. Still burning the midnight oil, he asked, his voice warm with concern rather than criticism. Sophia looked up, startled. "Oh, I didn't realize you were still here." She glanced at her watch and was surprised to see it was nearly 9. "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for tomorrow." Daniel nodded, entering her office and taking a seat in the chair across from her desk. "The preview you sent me earlier looked excellent. I have complete confidence in your work, Sophia." There it was again, that simple, sincere appreciation that made her feel simultaneously valued and seen. "Thank you. That means a lot." A comfortable silence settled between them as Daniel leaned back in the chair, loosening his tie slightly. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky, creating an oddly intimate atmosphere. "You know," Daniel said after a moment, his tone conversational, "when Thompson recommended you for this position, he said you were not only brilliant, but also the hardest worker he'd ever managed. I thought he was exaggerating." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Now I think he might have been understating the case. Sophia felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "I've always believed that anything worth doing is worth doing well. A philosophy I share." Daniel's eyes held hers steadily. "It's rare to find someone so aligned with my own work ethic and vision." There was something in his voice that made Sophia's pulse quicken slightly. The atmosphere in the office seemed to shift, becoming charged with an energy she couldn't quite name. Daniel stood suddenly, moving to the window to gaze out at the cityscape. With his back to her, his voice came softer, almost hesitant. "Sophia, may I speak frankly with you for a moment?" "Of course," she replied. Setting aside her work and giving him her full attention, he turned back to face her, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I've come to value our professional relationship immensely. Your contributions to this division have exceeded all expectations." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "But I find myself in a difficult position because my appreciation for you has evolved beyond the purely professional." Sophia felt her breath catch. Surely he wasn't saying what she thought he was saying. "I find myself thinking about you outside of work hours." Daniel continued, his steady voice, betraying just a hint of nervousness. "Looking forward to our meetings, creating reasons to stop by your office." He exhaled slowly. "In short, I've developed feelings for you, Sophia, feelings that go beyond admiration for a talented colleague." The confession hung in the air between them, weighty and unexpected. Sophia sat perfectly still, caught between shock and a complicated surge of emotions she wasn't prepared to examine. "I know this is inappropriate," Daniel said quickly, reading her silence as discomfort. "You're married and I'm your supervisor. I've wrestled with whether to say anything at all." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty from a man usually so composed. But I believe in honesty, and it felt dishonest to continue pretending my feelings were purely professional. Sophia found her voice at last. Daniel, I don't know what to say. She stood, needing to move to create some distance as she gathered her thoughts. I'm very flattered, truly, and I respect you enormously, both professionally and personally. But as you said you're married, he supplied gently. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them, given the state of her marriage, yet they were true, and Sophia had made vows she still took seriously despite Ethan's apparent disregard for them. Daniel nodded, accepting her response with grace. I understand completely, and I want to assure you that this changes nothing about our working relationship. Your position and the respect I have for your work remain exactly the same. The sincerity in his eyes confirmed his words. This was not a man who would punish her for rejecting his advances or make her work life uncomfortable. It was yet another way Daniel Harper differed from so many other men she'd encountered. Thank you for understanding, Sophia said softly, and for your honesty. I should be the one thanking you for your graciousness in handling my inappropriate confession. Daniel managed a small, self-deprecating smile. I hope you can forgive the momentary lapse in judgment. There's nothing to forgive, Sophia assured him, and she meant it. Though his timing and position made the revelation complicated, there was something undeniably moving about having earned the genuine affection of a man like Daniel Harper, a man who saw and valued her for far more than her physical appearance. Daniel moved toward the door, clearly wanting to give her space. I should let you finish your work. Again, I apologize for the interruption and for any discomfort I've caused, Daniel, Sophia called as he reached the doorway. He paused, turning back to her with questioning eyes. Thank you for respecting my marriage even when... She stopped herself, unwilling to speak aloud the thought that had nearly escaped, even when my husband doesn't. Daniel seemed to understand what remained unsaid. With a gentle nod, he left her office, closing the door softly behind him. Sophia sank back into her chair, her presentation forgotten as her mind whirled with conflicting emotions. On one level, she was flattered, even moved by Daniel's confession. His genuine appreciation for her mind and character stood in stark contrast to the increasingly callous treatment she received from Ethan. Yet despite everything she had meant what she said about her marriage, troubled as it was, she had made a commitment, and Sophia wasn't someone who walked away without giving everything she had to make things work. As she gathered her things to head home, a small, insistent voice in the back of her mind whispered an uncomfortable question. If she was so committed to her vows, why did Daniel's confession make her feel not only flustered but also hopeful? Sophia pushed the thought away firmly. What she needed now was to focus on repairing her marriage, not entertaining fantasies about her boss, no matter how honorable and attractive he might be. When she arrived home, she found Ethan sprawled on the couch watching television with a nearly empty bottle of expensive whiskey on the coffee table beside him. He barely glanced up as she entered. You're late, he commented, his tone accusatory, despite his own frequent absences. I had work to finish, Sophia replied, hanging up her coat. Important présentation tomorrow. Ethan snorted, taking another swig from his glass. All work and no play makes Sophia a dull girl. She bit back a retort, too emotionally drained from her interaction with Daniel to engage in another pointless argument with Ethan. Instead, she headed for the bathroom, craving a hot shower to wash away the day's tension. As she stood under the steaming water, Sophia found herself comparing the two men again, Daniel, who respected her boundaries and valued her mind, Ethan, who took her for granted and seemed increasingly resentful of her success. The contrast couldn't have been more stark, and for the first time Sophia allowed herself to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake in choosing Ethan, if perhaps the passionate love she had once felt for him had blinded her to fundamental flaws that no amount of commitment could overcome. It was a troubling thought, one that followed her into uneasy dreams where gray eyes watched her with quiet longing while blue ones glittered with cold disdain. Chapter 5. Second proposal. The company retreat. The weeks following Daniel's confession brought a curious mix of awkwardness and deepened respect between them. True to his word, Daniel maintained absolute professionalism, never again alluding to his feelings or putting Sophia in an uncomfortable position. If anything, he seemed determined to prove that his personal sentiments wouldn't interfere with their working relationship. For her part, Sophia threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, partly to distract herself from her increasingly troubled home life, and partly because the projects themselves were genuinely engaging. The division was thriving under their combined leadership, and the satisfaction of building something successful provided a welcome contrast to the slow collapse of her marriage. Not that she had given up on Ethan entirely. Sophia had made several attempts to address the growing distance between them, suggesting everything from date nights to couples counseling. Ethan responded to each overture, with initial enthusiasm that quickly faded to indifference or outright resentment. "Why are we going to waste money on some therapist who'll just tell me everything is my fault?" he demanded when she'd broached the subject of counseling. "If you weren't so busy trying to be Daniel Harper's star employee, maybe you'd have time to be a proper wife." The irony of this accusation coming from a man who was rarely home and contributed nothing to their household wasn't lost on Sophia. Yet she persisted desperately, wanting to believe there was still something worth saving in their relationship. It was in this conflicted state of mind that Sophia found herself preparing for the division's annual strategy retreat, a 3-day event at a mountain resort, where the team would evaluate progress and plan for the coming year. The prospect of spending extended time with Daniel outside the office brought a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that she tried her best to ignore. The night before her departure, Sophia had carefully packed her suitcase with professional attire suitable for both meetings and the more casual team-building activities scheduled throughout the retreat. Ethan lounged on their bed, watching her with thinly veiled suspicion. "3 days in the mountains with your precious boss," he commented, his tone acidic. "How convenient." Sophia continued folding a blouse, refusing to rise to the bait. "It's a company retreat, Ethan. The entire division will be there." "Right." He rolled his eyes. "And I'm sure St. Daniel will be the perfect gentleman." She paused, turning to face him fully. "What exactly are you implying?" Ethan sat up, his handsome face twisting into an ugly smirk. "Come on, Sophia. The man's had a thing for you since day one. Everyone can see it." "That's ridiculous," she replied, though her quickened pulse betrayed her. Had Daniel's feelings been that obvious to others? "We have a strictly professional relationship." "If you say so." Ethan's tone made it clear he didn't believe her. "Just don't expect me to sit around waiting while you're up there playing mountain games with your boss." The implication was clear and rich with hypocrisy. Given Ethan's own behavior, Sophia closed her suitcase with more force than necessary. "That's ironic coming from you. At least I've been honest about where I'm going and who I'll be with, which is more than I can say for you most nights." Ethan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means," Sophia said, too tired, too frustrated to pull her punches any longer. "The late nights, the unexplained expenses, the perfume on your clothes that isn't mine. Do you think I'm blind, Ethan?" He stood abruptly, moving toward her with a menacing energy that made Sophia take an instinctive step back. "So now I'm the bad guy because I have a social life, because I'm not content to be chained to a desk like you and your precious Daniel. Having a social life doesn't involve lying to your spouse or emptying our joint account for business opportunities that never materialize." Sophia shot back, refusing to be intimidated, despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with enough pressure to make her wince. "Careful, Sophia. You're starting to sound like you don't trust your husband." She looked directly into his blue eyes, once so captivating and now cold with barely suppressed anger. "Give me a reason to trust you, Ethan. Just one." For a moment she thought he might lash out further.